let's talk about training young avocado trees. There are a lot of little things to think about, but there are four main things that come to mind for me. And the first one is you want the tree to be able to stand up without a stake eventually. And so one thing you need is the canopy to be somewhat balanced, both side to side, as well as usually it needs to be a little narrower on the top than the bottom. So this is a young Hass tree, and what I see is the upper left is a little bit bulky or lopsided. You can see how strong that upper left branch is growing out there. And so what I've been doing, and I'll continue to do, is just pinch back the terminal buds here to check that growth, to keep it kind of stunted and bushed out rather than growing up and taking over and lopsiding the tree. But you also don't want a tree that's too top heavy and so has like little growth down low and a bunch of growth on top. This is a young Edinger, and it's kind of growing like a pole. It's got one vigorous branch down low that I actually want to keep, but I want to keep in check. It's fairly thick relative to the trunk, so that indicates it's getting a lot of energy from the tree, and it's going to grow fast if you don't keep an eye on it. But I'm not going to remove it for a couple reasons, one of which is I want some growth down low to sort of keep the tree balanced and anchored in that way. And so again, I've just been pinching the terminal out of it to keep it there, but keep it in check. There are times, however, when you can use one of those low-growing, vigorous water sprouts, they call them sometimes, because sometimes the leader that you've chosen or that the nursery has chosen for the tree doesn't really work out. The tree doesn't want to choose that as a leader. This here is a Gwen tree, and this was the original leader, and you can see it's growing next to the stake, tied to the stake. But down low, a couple of years ago, a really vigorous water sprout took off, and I decided to let it take over the tree because it was growing pretty vertically. So I knew it was going to balance the tree ultimately if I let it go. And so I've let it take over, and you can see the top of the tree, that's the water sprout. And it's a pretty balanced tree. You want a balanced tree both so the tree can stand up without a stake, but also so the tree can carry a fruit load. This is a lamb, tree about 7 years old, and it looks balanced, right? But from another perspective, you'll see that it's not. I made a mistake in training this tree when it was young. This is the trunk of the lamb tree, and you can see that from this perspective, it's heavily leaning. What happened was I allowed the canopy itself, especially up high, to get imbalanced, and then it set fruit on that imbalanced side, and the weight of the fruit just took the tree as a whole over to the south, and I've never been able to correct it. Slowly but surely I'm balancing it out, but it needed a lot of help originally for years, and so I wish I had trained it better in the early days. Another thing to think about when it comes to training a young tree and carrying fruit is how low you want the fruit to be, because if fruit sets on a low branch, it'll often weigh the branch down and the fruit will be developing on the ground. This is a little charwil tree, and you can see that it's got branches all the way down to the ground, And if, say, this spring any of these branches set fruit, that fruit's going to be just laying on the ground. And not a big deal to me, but it does discolor the peel of the avocado. And in fact, if you're trying to sell your avocados, it's actually illegal in California, if you can believe it. Illegal to sell fruit that has touched the ground. So what you might want to do is incrementally, as the tree gets taller and bigger, remove some of those lower limbs. This is a Carmen tree. I think it's 2 years old now. And that's what I've done. I've removed a few of the lower limbs. You can see one there. Another one over to the side. Anyway, I've removed some, but I haven't removed all. There's still some little limbs down low, and I actually want to keep those. I even wish I kept a little bit more of them, because one nice thing about keeping low limbs is that they shade the root zone of the tree, keep the soil under the tree cooler, and that's important if you live in a hot summer area like I do. And also those lower limbs, like you can see on this, this is a nabal here. Those lower limbs also help keep the leaves that drop in place. So you'll notice with a tree that has limbs left low that the leaves don't blow away. And so that provides a nice mulch for the roots, and ultimately it feeds the roots nutrients. Here's a mature Hass tree, and I'll go under it so you can see what it's like if you've left some lower limbs or some limbs that sweep down to the ground on a mature tree. You've got plenty of leaf litter that's not blown away, and it's really shady and cool, and the roots just love it. They'll grow right up into the mulch. One thing I did wrong with this tree, however, is I let it split and branch out in 3 ways, a little bit too low. That's only a problem because I irrigate it with a micro sprinkler, and that makes it a little tricky in distributing that micro sprinkler water. I have to make sure the sprinkler's low enough, and I have to put it on a specific side of the tree so that the low trunks don't block it too much. If I irrigated with drip lines, that would make no difference, but since I use a micro sprinkler, it would have been better had I let the trunk branch out laterally a little bit higher up, say at least knee height or higher. So what might you want to do to train a tree from the very beginning when you buy the tree and right at or before even planting? This little tree is a Hass on the left, and looks pretty balanced, right? And you look down low and you see that it's got some low branches, but they're relatively small. A rough rule of thumb is a third smaller, or a third the size of the main leader or the trunk is acceptable. So yeah, I'm just going to leave all those little branches to shade, a little bit anyway, to shade the trunk and the root zone when I plant that tree. On the other hand, if you look at this tree on the right, this is a little gem, and it's got a really strong lateral branch growing low to the right. That one there. It's a little bit too strong if you notice the size of it compared to the size of the trunk or the leader. So I'm rather than just pinching back the terminal end, I'll probably actually cut it back, maybe to there. I might even remove it entirely, since there's another little lateral coming up right here. So those are some things to think about when you're training a young avocado tree, so you get the tree that is an old avocado tree that's the shape and can do the work that you want it to do.